Alright, so we're going to go through an exercise called the pelvic clock. Alright, for this one you're going to try to hit each individual number on the clock 3 times. You're going to go through 3 rounds of this. I'll explain what I mean in a minute, but since you're just starting this video, you'll come back to it, and that's probably the information you need. What we're working on here is that tightness that we talk about that we get in the low back. We're trying to address that. We want our spine to be able to arch, we want it to be able to round, we want it to be able to twist both ways and do combinations of all of those things. So we're going to talk about how we do that. The pelvic clock is very much that. You're on your back, okay? And you're going to imagine that you've got a clock right on top of your lower abdomen and pelvic region here. You're going to feel these frontal hip bones, and what you're going to do is kind of like a rocking motion here. We use this imaginary clock to sort of guide us into what direction that we're describing. We'll just call this 12 o'clock, and we'll call that 6 o'clock, and we'll call this 3 o'clock, and we'll call this 9 o'clock. So as if you're looking at the face of the clock right here. Your belt buckle and your frontal hip bones are the landmarks that are going to move toward the number on the clock. So it's easier if I just show you. If I rock my pelvis upward here, that's 12 o'clock. If I rock it downward, right, belt buckle and both frontal hip bones all have that arcing motion downward, that is 6 o'clock. If they all go this way, so kind of like a twist, that's 9 o'clock. And then if I go the other way, that's 3 o'clock. So that's easy enough. That kind of gives you a little bit of an orientation. When you're doing these motions, you want it to just be coming from the pelvis and the low back moving. You don't want to be pushing with your feet to do anything. And you want to make sure that your shoulders and your neck are relaxed. It's very important that you're able to do this motion because we're trying to, again, this is a sign of good low back flexibility, and doing this exercise is going to help you with that tightness in that area. So those are the 4 cardinal directions, and that is usually pretty easy for people to get a handle on. But what you're going to do is also try to hit the other numbers on the clock. So we talked about 12 and 3 and 6 and 9, right? Note that I'm coming back to the center to pelvic neutral each time after I've done each number. But could you do 1 o'clock if I asked you to do that? 1 o'clock is right next to 12 o'clock, right? So it's right here. It's going to look a lot like good old 12 o'clock, but there's going to be a little bit of 3 sprinkled in there too. You're going to be tilting your pelvis a little bit to the left. So 1 o'clock kind of looks like this. Note that I'm feeling my frontal hip bones, and they are all moving in the same direction. They are all moving upward and to my left. Like that. 12 o'clock was this. Belt buckle and both frontal hip bones all move the same up to the top. And 1 o'clock is all that just a little bit to the side. 2 o'clock is very similar to 1 o'clock, but it's a little bit more lateral. Everything goes that way. 3 o'clock, good old-fashioned 3 o'clock, everything just tilts that way. So that's the concept of the clock. 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock are these sort of corners of our range of motion that we should be able to move into. 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock are various combinations of the 12 and the 3 that we described earlier. If you're having trouble doing the 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock, think about what's happening with your lower right back. Okay, if you are doing 1 o'clock, you should feel your lower left back. You should feel your lower left back pressing down into the mat or the floor a little bit more than on the right side. That's because you're kind of tilting this way. This side of the clock is the opposite, so 11 o'clock, 10 o'clock, they are mirror opposites of 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock respectively. So again, good old-fashioned 12 o'clock is coming up. I'm just rocking my pelvis. I feel both sides of my low back pressing down into the mat. I'm not pushing with my feet or anything like that. All the motion is isolated in my pelvis. If I were to do 11 o'clock, it would be that mirror opposite of 1 o'clock. So everything's going to kind of go this way and come back. And I'll feel the right lower back pressing down into the mat more than the left lower back. I come back to center. For 10 o'clock, it's more lateral. Okay, 10 o'clock is closer to what 9 o'clock feels like. Okay, and again, make sure both bones are going with you. Okay, don't just have one frontal hip bone go to the number and not the other. That's a big mistake that a lot of people make. This is 9 o'clock. So we'll kind of go backwards here. We'll do 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 6, 5, 4. This time, since we're on the bottom of the clock, we're not really rounding our back anymore. We're not having that 12 o'clock component where we're rounding our back and pressing it down into the mat. Now, for this bottom part of the clock, it's an arching component. That same arching component that we had with 6 o'clock. So again, same principles. Feeling both frontal hip bones, imagining the belt buckles going along with you. If I just did 9 o'clock, everything straight to the side and back, and I want to do 8 o'clock now, I'm going to do that but with a little bit of an arch. So I'm going to have these frontal hip bones kind of going down this way. And both have to go together. And then they come back. 7 o'clock, everything's going to arc this way and come back. This gets hard for people to do. They'll start wanting to throw one hip down, but not both. So it's an arch and a rotation. When you're doing 8 o'clock and 7 o'clock, you'll feel the left side of your low back lifting up off of the mat. 6 o'clock is good old-fashioned 6 o'clock. And then for 5 o'clock, my frontal hip bones and my belt buckle are all going this way, and the right side of my low back is lifting up a little bit. For 4 o'clock, it's more lateral. And then good old-fashioned 3 o'clock. So that's how I instruct it. You go each number through the clock, and then you go through that whole sequence 3 times. And the goal here is for both sides to be moving together, for you to be going through the full arc of motion for each number, because that indicates that you've got very good flexibility in your low back. You'll find some numbers are a little bit harder than the others. That's okay. Just keep at it, keep practicing. It will get better with time, and it will help that low back, that lumbar tightness.